hope all of you are doing well. So today we are going to complete our mechanism of breathing and how cellular respiration takes place inside the cell. So yesterday we have discussed that breathing is basically intake and exhalation of air, in which we'll take certain amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide and we'll breathe out certain amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Right. And this mechanism totally depends upon a phenomena that is Boyle's law. And what is Boyle's law? That is, uh, at constant temperature, the volume of a gas is basically inversely proportional to pressure. If you increase the pressure, the volume will go down. If you increase the volume, the pressure will go down. Now, we have to understand how this mechanism of inhalation and exhalation takes place with the help of Boyle's law. So, let us first of all understand the process of inhalation. So, when we inhale the air, this air goes inside our body on thoracic cavity and it creates a pressure over a muscular flap structure, and this muscular flap structure is known as diaphragm and it is dome shape. So on inhalation, first of all, air goes in thoracic cavity and this air exert force on diaphragm. So just above the abdomen, we have a dome shaped structure, and this dome shaped structure is known as diaphragm. It is a muscular flap like structure known as diaphragm. So diaphragm contracts and become flat. So due to this force exerted by the air, this diaphragm will go inside and become flat. Means it is dome shaped. After exerting the force by the air, it will become flat structure. So the diaphragm can't and become flat. Now due to this diaphragm become flat, the cavity, the thoracic cavity is the chest region of our body. The cavity which is present over here, okay, gets up a little space. So the volume of thoracic cavity or chest cavity increases. As well as on the other hand, the muscle which is present between the ribs, these muscles are known as intercostal muscles. When we inhale the air, these muscles pulls our rib cage outside. So the rib cage comes outward and upward. This will also helps in increasing the chest cavity or thoracic cavity. So external, there are two different types of intercostal muscle. External intercostal muscle, these are the external intercostal muscle. Okay, we have internal intercostal muscles too. What are intercostal muscles? The muscle which is present between the ribs. So external intercostal muscles contracts, and this helps in pulling rib cage outward and upward. So there are two things happening during the process of breathing. When we are inhaling the air, the diaphragm, which is a dome shaped structure, becomes flat or get contracted, as well as the external intercostal muscle, the muscle which is present between the ribs. It's pulling our rib cage towards outward, and upward. Fine. And due to both of these phenomena, the volume of thoracic cavity increases. Volume of thoracic cavity increase. So due to these both phenomena, the volume of thoracic cavity increases. Now, in our last turn, we have already discussed about Boyle's law. If the volume get increased, the pressure will get decreased. So the pressure inside lung decreases and the air which is present in thoracic cavity will go inside the lung. So this is how inhalation takes place. So first of all, air goes in thoracic cavity. It exerts a force on diaphragm. Diaphragm contract and become flat, as well as external intercostal muscle contract, and this helps in pulling rib cage outward and upward. Due to these two phenomena, contraction of diaphragm and movement of external intercostal muscle, the volume of thoracic cavity increases. And when the volume gets increased, the pressure inside the lung decreases and the air will goes inside the lung. So this is the mechanism of inhalation. Is that clear? Next thing is on exhalation. Exhalation. Exhalation is just opposite of inhalation. The diaphragm and external intercostal muscle relaxes. Now, due to the relaxation of diaphragm, the diaphragm regain its original shape, then it becomes dome shape, and due to the relaxation of external intercostal muscle, the rib cage moves inward and downward. And due to both of these phenomena, diaphragm become dome shaped and rib cage moves inward and outward, the volume of thoracic cavity decreases. Now, we have already discussed Boyle's law. If the volume is decreased, the pressure inside lung increase and the air will come out. So this is how the exhalation takes place. The mechanism of exhalation takes place. So again, what is happening when we are inhaling the air? So when we are inhaling the air, so this air exert the pressure over this muscular flap-like structure known as diaphragm, due to which it contract and become flat. So the volume of thoracic cavity means chest cavity increases. Also, on the other hand, the muscle which is present between the ribs, these also start getting contraction, and due to the contraction of these muscle, our rib cage, this whole area is known as rib cage, will comes outward and upward, due to which additional volume of thoracic cavity will appear. Now, due to these two phenomena, the volume of thorax or chest cavity increase, and whenever the volume is increased, automatically the pressure inside the lung get decreased. So the air present in thoracic cavity will go inside the lungs. On the other hand, when this diaphragm get relaxed and these external intercostal muscle get relaxed, they'll come to their original shape. It will become dome shaped. It will come to lower side, due to which the volume of chest cavity decreases, and whenever the volume get decreases, the pressure inside the lung increases, and when the pressure inside the lung increases, all the gas which is present inside our lungs will goes out of the body. So this is how inhalation and exhalation takes place. Is that clear? I hope it is clear now. Is it clear? Shall we move ahead? No. The respiratory rate in human is 12 to 16 times per minute. Means a healthy human can breathe in and breathe out either 12 or maximum up to 16 times per minute. But this rate can differ in a old age person, in a person who is getting fever, in uh, a neonate, means newly born baby. This rate can be differed. Now, this is measured by a device known as spirometer. So this is measured by a device known as spirometer. As well as we have different uh, lung volumes. So in exam, usually they'll ask directly question from these volumes. First of all, we have four different type of volume: tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, expiratory reserve volume, and residual volume. So tidal volume is denoted by TV. It is the amount of air which can be inhaled or exhaled during quiet breathing. So when we are doing quiet breathing, means normal breathing, this is quiet breathing. The amount of air we are inhaling and exhaling is 500 ml. Now, after quiet breathing or after a normal inhalation, the amount of air left in our lungs which can be inhaled forcefully is known as inspiratory reserve volume. Means when we are doing normal inhalation, I am doing a normal cycle of inhalation. Now, after that, I can inhale more air. It is a residual volume in my, it is a left out volume which can be taken up forcefully. Like, so this is my inspiratory reserve volume. So the volume left in the lungs after normal inhalation is inspiratory reserve volume. It is 2500 to 3000 ml. Expiratory reserve volume. The volume left in the lungs after normal exhalation. Let's see. So I am doing a normal inhalation and exhalation. This is normal inhalation. Now this is normal exhalation. Now I can also remove some amount of air through forceful exhalation. This amount, which is reserved in the lungs, can only be removed out of the lung through forceful exhalation is known as expiratory reserve volume. This is 1000 to 1100 ml. Now, residual volume. Residual volume, in short, we write it as RV, it is ERV, it is IRV. It is that amount which cannot be removed from the body either by normal exhalation or by forceful exhalation or by anything. So this volume cannot be removed from the body. This is residual volume. So it is 1100 to 1200 ml. So this is our lung volumes or pulmonary volumes. So this is the whole process of breathing. Next thing is cellular respiration. Now oxygen came inside our body. Now we have to, before cellular respiration, let's talk about how much amount of oxygen is transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide in blood. In which form these oxygen and carbon dioxide get transported in blood? So transport of oxygen and transport of carbon dioxide. So 3% oxygen dissolve in blood plasma. So 3% oxygen get dissolved inside the blood plasma. Is that clear? While 97% of oxygen is transported in the form of oxyhemoglobin. So 97% oxygen will get transported into the form of oxyhemoglobin. One hemoglobin molecule will react with 4 oxygen molecule to form a compound known as oxyhemoglobin. So this compound is known as oxyhemoglobin, and in normal language we called it as pure blood or oxygenated blood. No. If we talk about the transport of CO2, 7% CO2 dissolved in plasma, then 70% CO2 change in form of bicarbonates and get transported, and 23% CO2 transported in form of carb amino hemoglobin. So this carbon dioxide will bind to amine group of hemoglobin and form a compound known as carb amino hemoglobin. So in this form, carbon dioxide get transported inside our body. Now, after this, when the body will receive oxygen, they'll start performing cellular respiration. No, cell, as we are aerobic organism, we cannot live without oxygen. So we'll perform the type of respiration known as aerobic respiration. And the cycle of these respiration goes inside our every cell of the body except RBC. So what happen in aerobic respiration? First of all, it takes place inside cell in presence of oxygen. Second thing, it takes place in all body cells except RBC, because RBC do not contain mitochondria to carry out this whole process. So I am drawing a single cell of the body. It can be the cell of the skin, it can be the cell of the muscles, it can be the cells of the bone, it can be the cell of the brain, it can be the cell of the heart, it can be the cell of the lungs, it can be the cell of the kidney, whatever the cell it is. Okay, every cell performs cellular respiration. Now the oxygen comes inside the cell through blood, plus as well as the food that is in the form of glucose comes inside the cell through blood, and this cell will excrete out carbon dioxide into the blood, and blood will carry it towards the lungs, and from lungs when we exhale the air, this carbon dioxide will removed out. Now what happen inside the cell? So this is a cell. Every cell contain a liquid matrix or a fluid inside them. This liquid or this fluid is known as cytoplasm. So this fluid or this liquid is known as cytoplasm. So I'm not drawing all the components of the cell. I'm drawing only those things which is required for the aerobic respiration. So this is cytoplasm or cell fluid. This is cytoplasm. Now, what happens in cytoplasm? The glucose which came through the process of digestion through blood and the oxygen which came through the process of breathing in a cell, this glucose, that is C6H12O6, in cytoplasm it will enter into a cycle known as glycolysis Glyco means glucose, lysis means breakdown, or it is also known as EMP pathway in the name of the three different scientists, Emden, Meyerhoff, Parnas. So the glucose will enter into a cycle inside cytoplasm. This cycle is known as glycolysis, in which this 6 carbon compound, how many carbons are there in glucose? 6 carbon, will get converted into a 3 carbon compound known as pyruvic acid. So this is a 3 carbon compound. Glucose is a 6 carbon compound, and by 10 different steps of chemical reaction, this glucose, which is a 6 carbon compound, will gets converted into 3 carbon compound, that is pyruvic acid. So one molecule of glucose will yield 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. Both contain 3 carbons in them. Now this pyruvic acid with oxygen will enter inside another cellular organelle, which is known as the powerhouse of cell. So this is mitochondria, and inside mitochondria, this pyruvic acid will form 6 carbon dioxide, 6 water molecule. This carbon dioxide will goes outside the cell, will get mixed with the blood. Our blood will become deoxygenated. This deoxygenated blood will goes toward the deoxygenated blood will goes toward the lung, and by exhalation this carbon dioxide will goes out of body. Fine. And this water will get used up by the cell only. Plus it will form 36 or 38 ATP molecule. Now this cycle, which is going inside the mitochondria, was first of all discovered by Krebs. A scientist was Hans Krebs. Hence this cycle is known as Krebs cycle. So this whole process is going inside the cell. What is happening? Glucose, which is coming through the process of digestion, and oxygen, which is coming through the process of breathing. First of all, this glucose will enter in a cycle, that is glycolysis, in which there are 10 different reactions takes place, and this glucose molecule will break down into pyruvic acid. So one glucose molecule will yield 2 pyruvic acid molecule. Now these 2 pyruvic acid will combine with 6 oxygen molecule, and they will enter into another cellular organelle known as mitochondria, and inside mitochondria they'll form carbon dioxide, water, and 36 or 38 ATP. This carbon dioxide will go inside the out of the cell into the blood. From blood it will goes towards the lungs, and from lungs it will exhale out of the body. This water is used up by the cell, and these 36 or 38 ATP, these are the molecules which is required by every cells or every organs of the body to execute their function. So every cells or every organ inside them start synthesizing some currency. These currencies are ATP, and through these ATP expenditure, those cell or those organ perform their function. And this cycle in which this ATP is synthesizing is known as Krebs cycle. Hence mitochondria is known as powerhouse of cell. So this is aerobic respiration. If I totally sum up this reaction on another page in a simple way, what is happening? Glucose inside cytoplasm is entering into a cycle known as glycolysis or EMP pathway, and in 10 different step reactions, 10 step reactions, Means there are different 10 chemical reactions. They are forming two molecules of pyruvic acid. Two molecule of pyruvic acid. Pyruvic acid is 3 carbon containing compound. These two molecule of pyruvic acid, these two molecule of pyruvic acid combines with 6 oxygen and enters into mitochondria into a cycle known as Krebs cycle, also known as TCA cycle, because the first stable compound of this cycle contain carboxylic group, 3 carboxylic group. That's why the name is tricarboxylic acid cycle or citric acid cycle, because the first stable compound of this cycle is citric acid. That's why the name is citric acid cycle or and this citric acid contains 3 carboxylic group. Tricarboxylic acid cycle. So this cycle, Krebs cycle or TCA cycle or citric acid cycle, is going inside mitochondria, and again through 10 different reaction, this will yield 6 carbon dioxide plus 6 water molecule plus 36 or 38 ATP. So this is the reaction which is going inside each and every cell or organs of the body except RBC. Why? Because RBC do not contain mitochondria. They do not contain mitochondria. That's why inside RBC only glycolysis reactions takes place. Fine. So that is aerobic respiration. Next thing is anaerobic respiration. Now, anaerobic respiration occurs in two different ways. One is when there is a low amount of oxygen inside the body in limited oxygen supply or low amount of oxygen and in absence of oxygen. This reaction do not occur inside our body, as if there will be absence of oxygen inside our body, we'll get die. We cannot survive without oxygen. So this reaction will takes place, example, in muscle cell. But there is one condition. Normally our muscle cells perform aerobic respiration, but when our muscle cells is performing some heavy activities known as exercise. Exercises are any work without rest is said to be as exercise. So when a muscle cell do not get rest and it is doing some kind of exercise, there will be a limited supply of oxygen to that muscular tissue. Now what will happen? Glucose again in glycolysis, which is occurring in cytoplasm, will form two molecule of pyruvic acid, which is a 3 carbon compound. It contain how many carbon? 3 carbon. But due to limited supply of oxygen, means the amount of oxygen is not fulfilled in this reaction. The muscle is getting less oxygen as their oxygen is used up by the aerobic reaction earlier. Now, due to this lack of oxygen, this pyruvic acid will not enter into Krebs cycle, and this pyruvic acid will change into lactic acid, where in cytoplasm, plus in this reaction 2 ATP is formed, and these ATP came from the cycle of glycolysis, not from the Krebs cycle. If Krebs cycle is occurring, the amount of ATP will be higher. Now, due to the accumulation of lactic acid in muscle, accumulation of lactic acid in muscle, a person will feel muscle cramps. So due to the accumulation of lactic acid, the person will feel muscle cramp. So these are the reason of the pain when you are doing any kind of exercises, when you are uh, lifting heavy dumbbells. After a certain point, the muscle will receive less amount of oxygen and our body will synthesize an acid, that is lactic acid, partial partially for partial time lactic acid. When you will take rest and when the amount of oxygen is get fulfilled by breathing, this lactic acid will again converted into pyruvic acid, and pyruvic acid will receive oxygen as you have taken the rest, and this pyruvic acid will again goes inside the aerobic respiration. So this is how inside our muscle the cramps occur. On the other hand, in absence of oxygen, so in absence of oxygen, these reactions are performed by some microbes which can survive without oxygen, like yeast, lactobacillus, streptococcus, etc. Now, usually we use these microbes, means we generally use yeast in alcoholic industry. So there is a very large container. This container is known as fermenter or biofermenter. Now, what we do, we'll put cereals inside this container. Cereals like rice, cereals like barley and bajra, these kind of cereals. And these cereals contain sugar. Plus, this container do not contain any amount of oxygen. What we do, we'll add microbes like yeast, or the scientific name of yeast is Saccharomyces. What yeast will do, it will convert the sugar which is present in cereals in absence of oxygen, in absence of oxygen, into an alcohol C2H5OH, that is ethyl alcohol, plus carbon dioxide plus 2 ATP again. Now, whenever inside an industry the production of alcohol occurs from sugar, such type of reaction in industries are known as fermentation. What is fermentation? The conversion of sugar into alcohol in absence of oxygen through microbes like yeast or Saccharomyces. So, in this reaction, the cereals, whatever the cereal may be, like rice we have, barley we have, jaw we have, millet we have, these contain some sugars in them, carbohydrate in them. The yeast will convert these carbohydrate into ethyl alcohol, plus it will release carbon dioxide and 2 ATP in the absence of oxygen. And whenever in industries the alcohol, if the alcohol is formed from sugars, such type of reaction in industries are said to be as fermentation, and this container is known as biofermenter. Fermentation is the name of reaction. We simply define fermentation as the conversion of sugar into alcohol, and in the device in which fermentation occur is said to be as biofermenter. So this is your whole breathing and respiration. So that is the completion of breathing and respiration. From tomorrow on, we'll going to discuss about human circulatory system. In this human circulatory system, we'll talk about blood, sorry, blood vessels and our pumping organ, that is heart. So have a nice day. Bye bye. Good day. Take care.